Ladies and gentlemen, today we stand on the precipice of something powerful. We're on the verge of understanding what it truly means to be called to something higher, something greater than ourselves. We are here to speak about beginnings, humble and yet profound. We are here to talk about the early life and vocation of one who, like so many of us, began with little more than faith, hope, and a sense of purpose. In the heart of Buenos Aires, Argentina, a young boy was born not with a silver spoon, not with vast wealth or power, but born into a family who knew the value of love, sacrifice, and hard work. His name, Jorge Mario Bergoglio, would become known around the world, but in those early years, no one could have predicted the path his life would take. His life began like so many of ours, rooted in a family humble in its circumstances, yet rich with lessons that would shape him for the journey ahead. Imagine the world around this child. The bustling streets of Buenos Aires, the hum of everyday life, families working together, striving to make ends meet, finding joy in the small moments. This was not a world of extravagance, but of resilience. And in the midst of this world, there was a boy who saw things differently. A boy who didn't just look at the world with the eyes of a child, but with the eyes of one who saw potential everywhere. In the people he encountered, in the struggles he witnessed, in the simple hard work of life, he saw the value of every moment, of every person. He learned early on that greatness isn't born in palaces, but in the hearts of those who endure and persevere. But it wasn't just the family he was born into that shaped him. It was the way he was raised. In a home where faith was not something you just heard about on Sundays, but something you lived day in and day out. Faith was the foundation. Faith was the guiding light. And in that environment, Jorge would come to know the power of something greater than himself. His mother, Regina, and his father, Mario, instilled in him the values of hard work, humility, and above all, love. They didn't teach him about greatness in the way the world sees it. They taught him about greatness in the way that God sees it, found in the smallest act of kindness, in the quiet moments of sacrifice, in the deep and abiding love for others. And let's talk about that love for a moment. It wasn't a love that was only given when it was convenient. No, this love was different. It was a love that stretched, a love that endured, a love that looked beyond its own needs to see the needs of others. It wasn't a love for a friend or a neighbor only when it was easy. It was a love that transcended the bounds of comfort and convenience. It was a love that said, I am here for you, not when it's easy, but when you need me most. This love, this unyielding commitment to others, would come to define Jorge's journey. He was not a man born of privilege or entitlement. No, he was a man born of purpose. Born into a world that could have crushed his spirit, yet he emerged with a deep sense of mission, a mission that would not be easy, a mission that would not be without trial, but a mission that would ultimately change the course of history. Now think about his early years. This young boy didn't grow up in a lavish home. He didn't grow up in a place where the world rolled out the red carpet for him. No, he grew up in a home where hard work, humility, and perseverance were the values that mattered most. And these values were not simply taught, they were lived. Every day, in every moment, his family lived out what it meant to care for others. They lived out what it meant to be faithful, to be consistent, to be there for the ones you loved, no matter the cost. This wasn't a family that took shortcuts or sought quick fixes. This was a family that knew that true greatness comes through humility and service, through hard work and sacrifice. And this is where the journey begins, not with a dramatic moment of revelation, but with a simple call. A call that echoes in the hearts of so many of us. Come, follow me. That call didn't come with fanfare. It didn't come with lights or cameras or applause. It came in the quiet moments, in the stillness of the heart, It came in the moments of reflection when Jorge began to ask, what is my purpose? What is the reason for my life? And in those moments, he found a direction. He found a path. A path that would take him far from where he began, but always grounded in the values that had been instilled in him from the start. At a young age, Jorge didn't know the grand impact he would have on the world. He didn't know that his life would touch millions of lives around the globe. But he knew something deep within. He knew that his life would be about service. It would be about giving, not receiving. It would be about loving others in a way that went beyond what was expected, beyond what was comfortable. It would be about making a difference, not for his own glory, but for the glory of God. And it was this deep, abiding sense of purpose that led Jorge to make the choice that would shape the rest of his life. It wasn't a path of fame or fortune. It wasn't a path of ease or comfort. No, it was a path of sacrifice. It was a path of love that would demand everything from him, everything he had and everything he was. But it was also a path of joy, a joy that comes from knowing that in serving others, we are fulfilling the highest calling. So as we think about the early life of this young man, let us remember the power of the simple things. Let us remember the power of faith, the power of family, the power of hard work. And let us remember that greatness is not found in the accumulation of wealth or power, but in the quiet moments of service, in the love we show to others, in the small acts of kindness that, when added up, change the world. For Jorge Mario Bergoglio, the journey began not with a call to greatness, but with a call to serve. And that call, simple as it was, would echo throughout his life, shaping him into a man whose legacy would touch the hearts of millions, leading them to see the world in a new light. It was a journey that began with a quiet answer to a simple call, a call that each and every one of us can hear if we listen closely enough. It is a call to live for others, to love without limits, and to serve with joy. There comes a moment in every life when the ordinary gives way to the extraordinary. When the mundane tasks of daily living, the small choices, the quiet reflections, all come together and lead a person down a path that, though not chosen for its fame or recognition, becomes a path of purpose, deep, profound purpose that transcends the individual and touches the lives of countless others. This moment, this shift, is where the true journey of a soul begins. And for one man, it began on a path so radical, so different from the world around him, that it would transform not only his life, but the lives of millions. Jorge Mario Bergoglio, a young man from Buenos Aires, Argentina, did not come from a life of privilege. He wasn't born into a family that could give him all the world's material wealth, but in his heart, even from his early years, there was a fire. There was a sense that his life was meant for more than just the ordinary. And it wasn't about fame or wealth. It wasn't about titles or power. It was about something deeper, something far more lasting. It was a call to something sacred. A call that he could not ignore, a call that would send him on a journey that would begin with a step toward a life devoted not to himself, but to others. When Jorge was just 21 years old, he made a decision that would set the course of his life. He left behind the world of science, the world of logic, of reason, and entered into the unknown, stepping into the Society of Jesus, the Jesuits. This decision was not the result of a fleeting emotion, nor was it a simple change of career. It was at its core a response to something deeper, a response to the call of God, a response to a burning desire to live for something higher, something greater than anything he had known. But what does it mean to choose a life like this? What does it mean to commit to a path that demands everything you have, everything you are? A path that says, so life is no longer your own. You will live for others. You will give of yourself, not in part, but wholly. For Jorge, that path began with the Jesuit formation, a process that would take him from the bustling streets of Buenos Aires to a life of prayer, study, and service. It was a life marked by sacrifice, not just in the material sense, but in a way that demanded a deep commitment of the soul. The Jesuits are known for their intellectual rigor, their commitment to the poor, and their deep spirituality. These men have walked a road that few are willing to travel, and for Jorge, this road was not just a calling. It was the very essence of his being. The Jesuits did not simply teach him to study theology or philosophy. They taught him how to think, how to understand the world through the lens of faith, and how to apply that understanding to the needs of the world around him. They taught him that to serve others, you must first understand them. You must first know their pain, their struggles, their joys, their hopes. And so, the young Jorge Mario Bergoglio began his journey with the Jesuits, dedicating his life to the teachings and the way of life that had been passed down through centuries. It was not an easy road. It was not a path lined with comfort or ease. The road of the Jesuit is one of service, a life dedicated to God's will, to the people he serves, to the world that is so often broken and hurting. But Jorge did not walk this path alone. He walked with a community, with brothers who shared his vision, his passion, his commitment to something greater. And along the way, he encountered challenges that tested his faith, his resolve, and his love for the people he would serve. The formation was rigorous. It was not just about studying books or memorizing doctrines. It was about experiencing life with people. It was about walking alongside those who were hurting, those who were oppressed, those who were marginalized. And through these experiences, Jorge began to see the world differently. He saw the suffering of the poor, the injustice that permeated the streets of Buenos Aires, the pain of those who had nowhere to turn. But he also saw hope. He saw light in the darkest of places. He saw the power of love and faith to transform lives. And in that process of formation, Jorge's own soul was transformed. He was not the same man who had walked through the doors of the Jesuit community as a young man full of hope and ambition. He was being shaped. He was being shaped. He was being molded into something new, something greater. The Jesuit formation was not just an academic exercise. It was a spiritual journey, a deepening of the soul that would allow him to see the world through the eyes of Christ. It was a formation that would teach him not just to serve, but to love. But the story of Jorge's journey does not end with his formation. No, the formation was just the beginning. It was in the next stage, as he entered into the priesthood, that his true calling began to take shape. The priesthood was not just a role or a title, it was a commitment. It was a calling to serve God's people in a way that went beyond the ordinary. It was a calling to be a shepherd to those who were lost, to be a light in the darkness, to be a source of hope to those who had none. As Jorge was ordained as a priest, he began his ministry in the streets of Buenos Aires. He did not seek the high positions, the recognition, or the titles that often come with the priesthood. No, he sought the people. He sought the poor. He sought the poor. He sought the lost. He sought to serve, to love, and to bring God's light to those who needed it most. And in doing so, he became the hands and feet of Christ, not in some distant, abstract way, but in the very real, very tangible places where people needed hope. Through his service, Jorge came to understand the truth of the words of Christ. Whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers and sisters of mine, you did for me. He understood that the work of the priesthood was not about ceremony or position. It was about serving those in need, giving of oneself without counting the cost, loving those who felt forgotten or overlooked. It was about being Christ's hands in the world, healing the brokenhearted, comforting the weary, and offering hope to those who had none. And as he lived out this vocation, Jorge began to see that his calling was not just a personal journey. It was a mission to bring the message of Christ to the world, a mission to transform society from the inside out. It was a mission to build a community of believers who could work together to heal the wounds of the world, to lift up the oppressed, to offer peace in the midst of conflict. The formation, the priesthood, it all came together in one clear, unified mission, to serve others, to love without limits, and to live for something greater than oneself. Who? And as Jorge Mario Bergoglio embraced this mission, he began to see his life's purpose unfold before him, not in grand gestures, but in the small, quiet moments of service. He knew that his life was not his own. It was given to God, and through God, to the world. This was the journey of a man who, like all of us, faced challenges, doubts, and fears. But through the power of God's grace, through the example of those who walked before him, he was transformed. And as he continued to walk this path, he came to understand that this wasn't just about his life. It was about the lives of others. His journey was not his alone. It was a journey shared with the people he served, with the communities he loved, and with the God he served. This is the power of vocation. It is a call that goes beyond our own desires, beyond our own limitations, and into the lives of others. It is a call that demands everything, but in return it gives everything. And it is in answering that call with all of our heart, with all of our soul, with all of our strength, that we find true purpose, true fulfillment, and true joy. There are moments in life when a person is called not just to serve in one capacity, but to take on the mantle of leadership, to carry the weight of a responsibility that is not theirs alone. This call comes not for the sake of glory or recognition, but for the sake of something far greater, the service of others, the building of community, the guiding of souls. It is a call that demands sacrifice, patience, and wisdom. And it is a call that is not given lightly, but with a purpose that transcends the individual and touches the very heart of humanity. In 1992, a man who had already dedicated his life to the service of God's people would face that call in an entirely new way. A man who had walked the hard and humble path of a priest, a man who had been shaped by years of formation and service, was now stepping into a new role, the role of a bishop. And with that new role came a deeper level of responsibility, a responsibility to shepherd the faithful, to guide the church, and to carry the light of Christ into the darkest corners of the world. Jorge Mario Bergoglio, who would one day be known to the world as Pope Francis, found himself at a crossroads. He had already given his life in service to the church, but now, as he was named Bishop of Buenos Aires, he was asked to take on a weight that was not only personal, but communal. He was not just a man with a mission. He was a leader, a shepherd, and a guide for thousands of souls. And it was in this new role that his journey would take on a new dimension. What does it mean to be a bishop? What does it mean to serve as a spiritual leader for a community that looks to you not just for guidance, but for a reflection of Christ? It is a responsibility that requires humility, not self-promotion. It is a task that requires self-sacrifice, not self-interest. And it is a duty that requires a deep, abiding faith, a faith that can move mountains, a faith that inspires and strengthens the hearts of those who feel weak, weary, and forgotten. For Jorge Mario Bergoglio, being named a bishop was not about titles or recognition. It wasn't about the authority that comes with a position or the privileges that might follow. It was about being a servant. It was about living out the very essence of Christ's own ministry, which was to serve, to heal, and to love with abandon. For Jorge, this was not just a theological ideal, it was a way of life. And he knew that the only way he could truly lead others was to first serve them with humility, to walk alongside them in their struggles, their pain, and their hope. From the very beginning of his time as bishop, Jorge Mario Bergoglio committed himself to the people of Buenos Aires in a way that was radically different. He did not distance himself from the people he served. He did not place himself above them. Instead, he walked among them. He spent time with them. He listened to them, and most importantly, he loved them. In his eyes, there was no distinction between the rich and the poor, the powerful and the powerless. All were equal in the eyes of God, and all were deserving of his love, attention, and care. He was a bishop who did not sit in the high places of authority, isolated and detached from the lives of the people he served. No, he was a bishop who went into the streets, who met the people where they were, who shared their struggles and their joys. This was the heart of his ministry. It was not about wielding power or asserting dominance. It was about being present. It was about being a reflection of Christ in a world that often seemed lost and broken. For Jorge, being a bishop meant being with people in their suffering, in their doubt, and in their uncertainty. It meant being a source of hope when the world seemed hopeless. It meant showing the love of God in every interaction, in every moment, no matter how small or seemingly insignificant. But even as he lived out this profound ministry, Jorge Mario Bergoglio was not content to merely serve his local community. His heart was broader than that. He saw the church not as a series of walls and institutions, but as a living, breathing community of believers, a community that transcended borders, languages, and cultures. And so in 2001, his life took another turn as he was named a cardinal. This new position, while carrying its own weight, gave him the opportunity to serve the larger global community of the church. It gave him a voice that would resonate not just in Buenos Aires, but across the world. As a cardinal, Jorge's voice became a beacon. He spoke on issues of social justice, on the plight of the poor, on the importance of compassion, and on the need for the church to be a place of mercy, not judgment. He was not afraid to speak out against the injustices he saw in the world. Whether it was the inequality in his own country or the global issues of war, poverty, and suffering, he understood that the church was not just a place for the saved, but a place for the lost, the broken, and the forgotten. And he called the church to be a place of healing, not condemnation. His ministry as a cardinal was marked by a deep commitment to the marginalized. He was not concerned with power, with prestige, or with influence. He was concerned with the poor. He was concerned with the marginalized, the excluded, and the downtrodden. His heart broke for the people who had been abandoned by society, and he knew that his mission as a leader in the church was to bring them back to the fold. He was a cardinal who understood that leadership was not about authority, it was about service. It was about caring for those who could offer nothing in return. It was about loving those who had been cast aside, those whom the world had forgotten. This is the mark of true leadership. It is the willingness to serve when it is inconvenient. It is the commitment to love even when it costs us. It is the refusal to turn away from suffering even when it seems too much to bear. Jorge Mario Bergoglio did not seek the role of bishop or cardinal for personal gain. He sought it because he understood that leadership in the church was not about titles, it was about sacrifice. It was about following Christ's example, living not for oneself, but for others. And through all the years of his service, Jorge Mario Bergoglio never lost sight of the core mission: to serve the people of God, to lead them to Christ, and to show them the way to salvation. Whether as bishop or cardinal, his ministry was always marked by one simple truth, that in order to lead, you must first serve. In order to be a reflection of Christ, you must love without limits. And in order to bring hope to the world, you must be willing to walk into the darkest places and offer the light of Christ to those who need it most. He was a leader who never sought the limelight, who never sought accolades or praise. He was a servant who understood that true greatness comes not from what you accomplish, but from who you serve. And in serving others, he made a profound difference in the lives of countless people. Whether he was walking the streets of Buenos Aires, meeting with the poor, or speaking out for justice, Jorge Mario Bergoglio's leadership was a testament to the power of humility, of love, and of faith. Through his example, he taught us that leadership is not about standing on a pedestal. Oh, it is about getting down into the dirt, into the struggles, and walking alongside those who need help. It is about loving not from a distance, but up close. And it is about remembering that we are all equal in the eyes of God, that every soul is precious, and that every person deserves to be loved and cared for. There are moments in history when a single individual rises to the occasion, when a life that has been shaped by humility, service, and deep faith is called upon to lead not just a community, but a global movement. And this is what happened in 2013, when Jorge Mario Bergoglio, a man who had already given his life to the service of others, became the 266th Pope of the Roman Catholic Church. It was a moment not just of great significance for the Catholic Church, but for the world. The world watched as a humble servant, a man of deep prayer, and a true disciple of Christ took on a role that would make an indelible impact on the lives of millions across every corner of the globe. In the days that followed that historic election, Pope Francis quickly set the tone for his papacy. He chose the name Francis not by coincidence, but because of the deep connection he felt with St. Francis of Assisi, a man who lived a life of poverty, simplicity, and profound love for God's creation. Pope Francis stepped into the papacy with a clear message, a message that would reverberate throughout the church, the world, and the hearts of people everywhere. We must be a church that is not afraid to go out into the streets. We must be a church that is close to the people, especially the poor, the marginalized, the suffering, and the lost. From the very beginning, Pope Francis set himself apart by his actions. He didn't arrive in Rome in a way that was grand or imposing. He did not wear the papal robes with the sense of worldly authority that one might expect from a man in his position. No, he chose to live simply. He lived in a modest guest house instead of the grand papal apartments. He made a deliberate choice to embrace humility, a humility that would be the cornerstone of his papacy. He understood that his role was not to rule from a throne, but to serve. And this approach had a profound impact on the global community. It wasn't just the people in the pews of St. Peter's Basilica who noticed this change. It was the world. Leaders from all walks of life, from heads of state to everyday people in the streets, began to take notice. His humble presence was a stark contrast to the power structures that so often dominate the world stage. He lived out the message of Christ, not in words alone, but in actions. His papacy was not one that was concerned with titles, ceremonies, or the trappings of power. It was about service. It was about love. It was about bringing Christ to the people, especially those who felt forgotten or abandoned. One of the most remarkable aspects of Pope Francis's papacy has been his focus on the marginalized. He has never shied away from addressing issues like poverty, inequality, and injustice. He has consistently called on the faithful and indeed all of humanity to reach out to those who are suffering, to care for the poor, and to build a society that is more just, more compassionate, and more inclusive. And he didn't just talk about these issues from the comfort of the Vatican. He went into the streets, into the slums, into the places where people are hurting, and he listened. He didn't just preach to the choir. He sought to walk alongside those who had been ignored or dismissed by society. He made it clear that the true church is not a fortress to protect its own, but a hospital to heal the wounded, a refuge for the broken. But Pope Francis's message wasn't just about compassion for the poor. It was about love for all of humanity. He has spoken out boldly on issues of climate change, the treatment of refugees, and the need for peace in a fractured world. He has been a voice for the voiceless, calling for global solidarity in the face of crises. Well, he has consistently reminded us that the world is interconnected, that we are all brothers and sisters, and that the actions of one can have a profound impact on many. In his encyclical Laudato Si, Pope Francis brought attention to the urgency of caring for the earth. He reminded the world that our planet is not just a resource to be exploited for personal gain, but a gift from God that must be cherished and protected. He called on every person, regardless of faith, to take responsibility for the environment and to work toward a more sustainable future. In doing so, he showed that the papacy was not just about religious concerns, but about addressing the issues that affect all of humanity. The planet is our common home, and its well-being is intrinsically linked to our own well-being. Pope Francis's emphasis on mercy is another hallmark of his papacy. In a world where judgment and condemnation often seem to reign, Pope Francis has consistently called for mercy, compassion, and forgiveness. He declared a Jubilee year of mercy, urging the faithful to embrace forgiveness, to extend a hand to those who have wronged them, and to seek reconciliation. He reminded us that mercy is the very heart of the gospel message, that Jesus came not to condemn, but to save. This message resonated deeply with people around the world, regardless of their background or belief system. It was a message that transcended boundaries and reached into the hearts of all people. But it was not just Pope Francis's words that made an impact. It was his actions. Whether visiting the sick in the hospital, washing the feet of prisoners on Holy Thursday, or meeting with victims of war and violence, Pope Francis consistently demonstrated what it means to live out the gospel in the most practical and tangible ways. He embodied Christ's love, not just in his words, but in his very presence. And that presence has been a source of hope and inspiration for millions of people around the world. Through his papacy, Pope Francis has shown us what it means to be a true servant leader. He has shown us that leadership is not about seeking power or recognition, but about serving others with humility and love. He has shown us that true greatness lies not in the pursuit of personal success, but in the willingness to sacrifice for the good of others. His papacy has been a powerful reminder that the church is not a place for the self-righteous, but a place for sinners seeking redemption, for the broken looking for healing, for the lost longing to be found. His impact has not been limited to the Catholic Church alone. Pope Francis has become a global figure, admired and respected by people of all faiths and backgrounds. His voice has echoed in halls of power, but also in the homes of ordinary people. He has become a symbol of hope for the world, a reminder that love and mercy are more powerful than judgment and division. In a time of political polarization, religious conflict, and social unrest, Pope Francis has been a voice of reason, compassion, and unity. He has shown us that the things that divide us are far less important than the things that unite us, our shared humanity, our desire for peace, and our capacity to love one another. Pope Francis's vision for the Church is one of inclusivity, mercy, and service. He has repeatedly emphasized that the Church is not a fortress to protect its own, but a field hospital to heal the wounds of the world. He has called on the faithful to go out to the margins, to embrace those who are suffering, and to share the love of Christ with all people, regardless of their background or beliefs. He has shown us that the Church must be a place of healing, not judgment, a place of mercy, not condemnation. His message has inspired millions to embrace their faith with renewed vigor, to live out their Christian calling with courage and compassion. But Pope Francis's impact has not just been felt by individuals, it has been felt by nations. His global influence has been far-reaching, from his calls for peace in the Middle East to his work on behalf of refugees and migrants. He has been a tireless advocate for the vulnerable and the oppressed. His advocacy for the poor and the marginalized has sparked a renewed conversation about social justice, human rights, and the need for a more just and compassionate world. He has become a moral voice in the world, challenging world leaders to prioritize the common good over political gain, to care for the poor over the powerful, and to seek peace in a world that is often torn by conflict. Through his leadership, Pope Francis has reminded us of the power of love and mercy. He has shown us that even in the darkest moments, there is hope, and that hope comes from our ability to love one another. His papacy has been a call to action, a call to live out the values of the gospel not just in our personal lives, but in the world around us. He has shown us that the message of Christ is not just a message for the church, but a message for the world. It is a message of peace, of justice, of mercy, and of love. In 2025, the world stands at a crossroads, a place where the choices we make, the paths we take, and the values we uphold will shape not only our future, but the future of generations to come. In these turbulent times, there are few voices that can bring clarity, hope, and vision to the global stage. Fewer still that can carry the weight of the responsibility of leading millions of souls toward a common purpose. But the papacy in 2025 is more than just a spiritual office. It is a beacon. It is a light that shines in the darkness of our world, calling us to follow a path of hope, unity, and peace. So, as we look forward into the next chapters of the Church's journey, we are reminded that the mission of the papacy in this, as it has always been, remains focused on one central truth, that we are called to love. Let us pause for a moment and reflect on this call. A call that goes beyond the confines of the Catholic faith. A call that transcends geographical, political, and social boundaries. A call to love our neighbors, to care for the oppressed, to welcome the stranger, and to offer mercy where it is needed most. This is the foundation upon which the papacy stands, today, tomorrow, and in 2025. The voice that guides the Church and reaches into the corners of the earth is not one that shouts condemnation or judgment. No, the voice of the papacy is a voice of compassion, calling us all to the higher path of mercy, grace, and understanding. In 2025, the papacy continues to serve as a global moral compass, reminding us of our collective responsibility to uphold the values of peace, justice, and dignity for all of humanity. The call to be a people of peace has never been more urgent. With conflict and division threatening the world, with crises both man-made and natural pulling at the fabric of societies, the need for healing and reconciliation has never been greater. The papacy in these times is called not just to guide, but to act as a mediator, a bridge across divides that seem too wide to cross. In this sense, the papacy is not a distant entity, but a force that reaches out into the lives of ordinary people in their struggles and their hopes. And in these times, the world needs more than just religious leadership. It needs spiritual strength that comes from deep within the heart of the Church, where the teachings of Christ, of humility, of selflessness, and of sacrifice are lived out in every word and every action. The papacy in 2025 is a reminder to each one of us that the path to greatness is not through power, wealth, or position. No, it is through serving others. It is through love that binds us together in community, and through forgiveness that we find peace with one another. It is through the pursuit of justice that we offer hope to those who have been left behind by society. The role of the papacy today and into 2025 extends beyond the walls of the Vatican. It has spread across the globe, touching lives in ways that no political leader or earthly institution ever could. The papacy stands as a global witness to the teachings of Christ, reminding us that we are all brothers and sisters, that every human life is precious, and that we have a moral obligation to care for each other, especially those most in need. The mission of the Church is not just about protecting its own interests. It is about reaching out to a world in pain, to a world in crisis, to a world in search of truth, healing, and love. In 2025, the papacy continues to challenge us to recognize the dignity of every human being, regardless of their race, creed, or status. It calls us to tear down the walls that divide us, to heal the wounds that separate us, and to build a world where peace and love prevail over hate and fear. We are reminded that in the eyes of God, there is no difference between the rich and the poor, the powerful and the powerless, the strong and the weak. All are created in His image, and all are called to be part of His kingdom. And it is in this vision of inclusivity, of community, and of compassion that the papacy finds its strength. Now, as we look at the role of the papacy in 2025, we must ask ourselves, how are we living out the call to love and serve our neighbors? How are we embodying the teachings of Christ in our own lives, in our communities, in our world? It is easy in this time of division to feel overwhelmed or powerless. It is easy to think that one voice, one person can't make a difference. But the papacy in 2025 shows us that each of us has a role to play. Each of us has the capacity to bring light into the darkness, to be a beacon of hope and peace in a world that so desperately needs it. The papacy today, under the leadership of the Holy Father, is not about maintaining the status quo, but about transforming the world through love and mercy. It is not about holding on to power for power's sake, but about wielding influence to make the world more just, more peaceful, and more compassionate. This is not a job for the faint of heart. It requires courage, wisdom, and a deep commitment to the well-being of all people, especially those who are suffering. Pope Francis and the papacy as a whole challenges us to embrace this vision. It challenges us to step outside of our comfort zones, to love when it is difficult, to forgive when it is hard, and to seek peace when it seems impossible. The papacy in 2025 is a reminder that each of us has been called to be a servant leader, to care for the marginalized, to feed the hungry, and to heal the brokenhearted. It calls us to remember that the church is not just a building, a collection of people, or an institution. It is the body of Christ alive and active in the world today. We are the church, and the work of the papacy is the work of all of us. The papacy challenges us to be agents of change, to carry the message of Christ's love wherever we go, to speak out against injustice, and to be a voice for the voiceless. In 2025, the papacy continues to inspire us to be more than just followers. It inspires us to be leaders in the cause of peace, justice, and love. In the coming years, the challenges we face will only grow more complex. Global conflicts, economic inequality, climate change, and the cries of the poor and marginalized will continue to demand our attention and our action. But the papacy, in its wisdom, its humility, and its compassion, shows us that the way forward is not through division or isolation. The way forward is through unity, through understanding, and through a deep commitment to the common good. It shows us that we are all in this together, that the struggles of one are the struggles of all, and that in the eyes of God, every life matters. So in 2025, we look to the papacy not as a distant institution, but as a living, breathing example of how we can live out the teachings of Christ in a broken world. We look to it for guidance, for inspiration, and for the strength to continue the work of healing, of building, and of loving. And we are reminded that no matter how dark the world may seem, there is always hope. There is always light. There is always love. And it is in the power of that love, expressed through service, compassion, and mercy, that the papacy continues to change the world.